Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jonah from Spotlight, and today we're going to be talking to Thomas and Felipe. How are you two doing?
Great. Doing really, really well.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. Super excited to have you both here. I just want to call out quick. We've done one event with Thomas as part of our Discover Fest back when we were Discover, and it was a total blast. I immediately after downloaded Blender and started playing around again because I was just like, holy so cool. But super excited to be here. I got a couple things to say before we dive in. First off, please hop in the comments if you're here. Let us know how you're doing, where you're tuning in from, something you're excited to learn, maybe how you heard about Thomas or Spotlight. We love hearing all of that. And throughout the presentation today, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. If we don't answer right away, we're not ignoring you. We've set aside time at the end to answer all of your questions. So pop them in the chat when you have them. And when we get to the Q&A, if it seems like we didn't grab it, pop it in there again. We're going to try and answer all of your questions today. And if life happens around you, the dog comes in the room, the presentation's moving fast, don't fret. All of this will be available on a replay. It'll be on the Spotlight event page on YouTube, and it'll also be emailed to you along with the course offer, which we'll talk about a little later. And last but not least, just to make sure everyone is in the right place, like I said, we are talking to Thomas and Felipe today about how to create 3D art free and fast. We're going to break down the basics of 3D modeling in the free software Blender, ensuring you have the tools needed to make 3D art for video games. And this event is a little different because this is actually a 3-part series. So we're going to be here today, tomorrow, and the day after diving into these things. So if you didn't notice that, head over to the Spotlight event page. If you already RSVP'd, you're going to get notified about all of those. If you haven't yet, RSVP so you get those course offers and all of that. Good stuff. However, I know we got a lot to cover today, so I don't want to take up any more time. I do want to just call out quickly. We got people tuning in from Mexico, from Brazil, from Germany, from Canada, from Poland, from Kenya. Thank you all
Wow.
for being here today. That's so cool.
Amazing.
So I'm going to hand it over to you, Thomas. I'm super excited to dive in. If you could just introduce yourself for
Yeah.
anyone who doesn't know, and then we'll get going.
Cool. So my name is Thomas Brush, and I run a video game studio called Atmos Games. And I also run an online school. So about 50% of my time is making games, and 50% of my time is teaching other people how to make games. And I have a YouTube channel with about 270,000 subscribers. And with me is a brilliant man named Felipe, and he is my lead 3D modeler at my studio. And he's actually working with me on our next game called Father. So Felipe, you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Thomas. You're very generous. My name is Felipe Caravelli. I am the 3D artist at Thomas Studio, working on Father as he spoke as well. I've been doing 3D for about 10 years now, 11 years. And it's been a fantastic journey. It's been very fulfilling. And I hope you guys join into that as well, because there's a lot of great stuff coming up. So
Yeah.
stick
Yeah.
around.
And so basically, guys, what we're going to do here, me and Felipe are going to sort of tag team here, and we're going to tell you about 4 free tools that you need to learn to master 3D art. One of the things that I used to think when I was originally thinking about moving from 2D game development to 3D game development is I thought, well, that's expensive. Like that's AAA, right? That takes way too much time and too much money. I don't have the budget for that. Because, well, for me, I'm an independent game developer. I think a lot of you guys are interested in indie games. So we're going to talk about the free way to do this. And we're really going to focus on 3D modeling for independent games. There's a difference between 3D modeling for AAA and 3D, or indie, not 3D. So here are the 4 tools, okay? There's 3D modeling tools and that's going to be Blender. There's also 3D painting tools, that's Substance Painter. There's 3D texturing tools, that's Photoshop. And there's 3D world building tools, that is bringing all of those assets together into one world, and that's Unity. Okay. Now, 2 of these admittedly are free 30-day trials. So that's number 2 and number 3 here. And that's Substance Painter and that's Photoshop, because those are Adobe products, and Adobe, they've got a subscription model. But this is what's really cool. Blender and Unity, which they're honestly the best tools, the most, I think, crucial foundation to 3D modeling. Those are totally free forever. So really quick, we've already briefly talked about this, but why should you listen to us? Well, there's a million 3D courses out there. There's also a million 3D artists out there, but we actually are doing the thing. I think that's what sets me and Felipe apart is we are actually making indie games while we teach about them. I don't know why I decided to make this the business model, but my studio, the way we do things, imagine Blizzard was making games and then they also had a program where they taught about how to do it. Like that's kind of our business model, and it's a lot of work, but I think it's what really sets us apart. So for me, I made two 2D games, and they're on pretty much every platform: Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, and also Apple Arcade. And that was a really, really fun relationship that I got to build with Apple. Now, Felipe, he's got the credentials for 3D art. Felipe, you want to quickly tell us about your credentials here?
So I started off my journey at IMB Morumbi University in São Paulo, Brazil. That's where I come from. And I moved to Canada in 2014, where I took my game design course as well in a Vancouver film school. So I do have a game design background, which is great. But the thing that I always was leaning towards was 3D. And this is where it took me today, working with Thomas. So it's great.
Cool. So as you can see, guys, we're actually doing the thing. We're actually teaching what we're doing. And I do think that that's a rarity. So hopefully we can provide some insight that's a little different. One of the things that I talk about a lot on my YouTube channel, and one of the things that Felipe and I teach in our course, is 3D models that are stylized, and they're specifically for independent games. So for example, this model here that Felipe made, and he actually teaches how to do this in our program, 3D Art Pro. This model here is simplistic, doesn't take a lot of time, but it's very beautiful. It looks like something you might even see in Breath of the Wild. This simplistic approach, this fast approach to 3D modeling is honestly, it's crucial if you want to be an indie game developer. You don't have a ton of time. A lot of you aren't even full-time, right? Most indie game developers aren't full-time. They're doing it on the side as a hobby. And so you got to think, like, how much time do I have to make a sword, for example? Do I have all week? No, I've got a couple hours. And so that's really what we focus on. Here's another example. This is actually Shovel Knight. This is a fan art that Felipe did. Very simplistic model here. In fact, I don't even see any texturing here. It's very simplistic, right? But it looks beautiful. This is fan art that Felipe did for my game Neversong. So the way our relationship works, the way we run our studio is, I handle a lot of the 3D aspects of bringing assets into Unity. We're going to talk about Unity in a second. But I also just provide art direction. I'll send him sketches. I'll tell him about the colors I'm looking for, the mood. And so, for example, right here, Neversong was a 2D game. He took those concept the concept art, and he brought it into a 3D world. And he did it fast. That's the important part. So some great models here, even some realistic models. So this is an example of hyper-realistic models. This is more simplistic models. This is actually what we focus on here. So there's my 2D game, Neversong. And when Felipe and I combine our skills, so for me, it's Unity, right? Bringing models into Unity, coding games, but also art direction. And then for Felipe, it's creating models fast and using art direction to create a world like this. So this is our game, Father. We're really, really excited about. Actually, this game is actually at GDC right now. So it's funny, we're launching a 3D art course, but we're also launching a demo at GDC right now. So literally, we are doing both things at once. So that's really what I think separates Felipe and I out from the rest of the crowd. But I think we've done an incredible job. We're really, really proud of what we've accomplished here. So Father's looking great. Really beautiful looking game. So Felipe, do you want to take it away? What we want to do, guys, we want to give you a brief flyover here. So Felipe's going to start this. We're going to talk about these 4 free tools. And instead of talking about them, we're actually just going to open them up and give you a brief overview. We don't want to give you the technical aspects of each piece of software. We're not trying to teach you everything. All we want to do right now is, I guess, inspire you guys and let you know that you can do it. Like, it's totally possible. So Felipe, do you want to give us a quick Blender overview?
Yeah, sure. And I'll be happy to. This sword that you guys are seeing here, this is part of our course 3D Art Pro. So we're going to be teaching essentially how you can come up and make your own thing, or if you just want to reproduce this. So this is made in Blender, like we were talking before. And the beauty about Blender is not only that it's free, but really has come a long way, because I remember I come from like a background of like 3ds Max and Maya, all these standards of the industry, and Blender was really not there, I think, in my opinion, about 10 years ago, but it really is now. It really came true. And I think if you are an indie developer, it's a no-brainer. The best choice that you can do right now. It really feels like a software made for this day and age, 2022. And it's constantly being updated as well. It has a huge community. It has a lot of add-ons. I can't stress enough how good this thing is. And hopefully you're going to agree with us, and then you're going to learn that from us as well. So in the example of the sword here, like I said, like it's not a particularly complicated model, but it's nice enough, I guess, to fit into your fantasy game. Like you said, like maybe a Zelda Breath of the Wild, that kind of game. And it has enough details as well, I think, to carry itself. But as you can see here, the model is actually composed by a lot of different pieces. And all these pieces comes from primitives. And primitives meaning like cubes, cylinders, cones, or spheres, anything like that. And that's exactly what Blender offers you like from the get-go. So for example, if I was to make the hilt of our sword here, that started off as a cylinder, right? And I can just go ahead and show you how I made that. So like I said, Blender gives you some of these initial primitives for you to play around with. So in case of the cylinder here, we could just, drag it and move it around in a 3D space, which is already really cool. We can rotate it, and we can actually lock our rotation here to be 90 degrees, and we can scale it down. So like we can really modify this shape, and we can add more modification to it as we go along based on necessity. So in the case of the sword here, this actually comes from a concept. And the beauty about working with Thomas is that I don't really have to think too much, because he provides great direction. Like he has like a concept art for a weapon of how he wants the level to look like. And, I can put my own twist into it as well. But the idea here is if you have good concept to work with, it makes things a little bit easier. And when it comes to swords, it's a pretty important object. It's pretty cool. And I always like to give a cool story for the weapon that I'm making or anything like that. So you got to think about these things too. Like, well, why the design is like this? Where did this come from? Maybe it comes from a kingdom that has a lot of gems. So you have a lot of these like jewels encrusted into your sword. So you got to think about all these things. And that's all about making art and making 3D, right? So really, really cool. So an example of like making this hilt, just to show you as an example of what I was doing here. So we can go ahead and grab the cylinder. We can, like I said, like scale it down and squish it. And then you can go into more detail here and you pull these vertices. So just very simple stuff. And we're almost there, really. But what separates this shape apart from the cylinder that we have right now is that we added these cuts into it, which we call loop cuts. And you can simply do that with a few clicks. So if I was to cut into our model here a little bit, you're going to see very quickly that we're going to have the geometry that we need to complete this cylinder. I'm not trying to be precise here. Just trying to show a little bit how I got to it. Now, we go back to this, and we still see that we haven't modified this shape a lot. And that's because we still need to select the vertices that we want, and then we scale them in. And what used to be a cylinder is now the hilt of the sword. So very easy stuff. And that's the thing about 3D as well. I actually started on 3D because I can't draw. And that's the truth about it. But when you don't need to draw, and you know a little bit about perspective, and you kind of learn these tools, there you go. You simply made something super quickly. And once everything is finalized and you compose all the pieces of this thing, it will look into a sword. It will look like a really cool sword. And that's just really the first step, because right now this sword is looking rather gray and maybe not so interesting, maybe a little bit interesting on its own, but it could use a little bit of color. So that's where Substance Painter comes in. And the cool thing about Substance and like an Adobe, since they acquired it, is that they allow you to use Substance Painter for 30 days. There's a whole lot of things that you can learn from it, but with the course that we're going to be providing you, you can actually learn a lot that you're going to be using for your indie games in very short amount of time. So let's say I want to bring that sword into Substance Painter just to demonstrate the power of this tool. So I'm just going to load up the sword here. The same sword you saw in Blender. There's nothing on it. It's just a blank sword. And let's say, because again, Substance comes with a lot of really cool textures and materials that you can just use the way you see fit, or you can modify. And we're also going to be covering like how you make your own from scratch. But let me just grab what's called a smart material here. I'm going to find one that I think is really cool to demonstrate. I believe it's called something heavy metal. There you go. This is the one. I'm just going to throw this material into our sword. And now you can see that there's a lot of detail that was added here. Like this thing that looks like rust and all that stuff. This is not modeled. This is all textured on top of like the model that we had before. And it does an okay job, but it's not really taking advantage of the shape of the sword, right? And that's because we haven't really baked our mesh. And that's a little bit technical. So I'm just going to skip the explanation here. We're going to go into more detail on that in the course, but just to show you the power of what this software can do. So right now, it's just going to be processing some stuff in the back end. It looks cool and scary at the same time, but hopefully, it will make sense for you in a little bit. So just going to let that generate the maps that we're doing here. And look at that. Beautiful, right? And again, this is the exact same material. Nothing changed. I didn't even like deleted this layer here, right? And look how much Substance saves up on time if you're just using a simple pre-made material that the library of the software allows you to use, right? And there's a whole bunch of them here as well that we could be playing around with. But the point is, this is an amazing software that's going to save so much time for you and allows you to create beautiful art really, really quickly. And you can like disable some of the layers, you can place them around. So it's really cool. And the thing that I want to say about that as well is that, sure, you have a really nice finalized sword here almost, but not really, because anybody can just come and drag this material into it and call it a day. But really, the work comes from being able to edit and add little details and making sure that this is really unique. Like it's just not a material that you're just going to copy and paste on top of your sword. And the good thing is that we're going to be teaching you how you can make your own material from scratch. So you can just go and, if you want to make the sword like gold, you can just go and select the color. And again, it's very intuitive. It's kind of like Photoshop, really, because especially now that Adobe owns it, and you can just change some metallic value here. You can change some roughness. And now suddenly that sword is already looking shiny and gold. And you can go and add another layer, and make some other details here. So for example, if I wanted to make it like it's a little worn off, for example, we can just go there and add some other really cool generators that Substance Beta comes with. You can alter the values, make it super aggressive or not so much. And then you can come in and edit that. You can change the opacity so it's like a little bit more subtle. So there's a lot that you can do with this. And that's really the whole point here. You should know how to do this if you want to take your indie games to the next level. That's really it. Before it was like a tool of the AAA industry. Now it's in your hands and you can learn how to do that really well. So that's really it for me.
Great. Felipe, that's so cool. And it's great working with Felipe because, I'm traditionally a 2D game developer. Jumping into 3D was really, really scary. And, watching Felipe do this and learning from him as a team member has been really inspiring because I'm learning, it's actually kind of easy. It does require talent, but it's pretty easy to get started and to create a beautiful looking texture and material for your unwrapped sword. So let's jump into the my screen here. Let's talk about Unity. Okay, so guys, what do you do once you have, let's say you create a sword, maybe you create some guns and you create some enemy types, some rocks. What do? Like, how do you create a world? What I used to think is, well, you just create the world in Blender. You just put everything inside of Blender. But that's not the case. You put it inside of a piece of software like Unity, okay? You can also put it in Unreal, but we focus specifically on Unity because that's what I use, and that's what me and Felipe both use creating our games, okay? So I'm going to jump into Unity here. So this is the sword inside of Unity. Now it looks a little bit different, just because the shaders are just basically it's just code that makes your material look a specific way. The shaders kind of match, so the sword looks pretty much the same. But you'll notice that a sword in Blender might look different than a sword in Substance Painter, and it might look a little bit different in Unity. But generally, they look about the same here. So this is our sword inside of Unity. Okay. Now I'm going to delete it really quick and show you how it got here. So all I really needed to do was once Felipe sends me the fantasy sword.
Oh, Thomas, real quick, I'm not sure if we're seeing the sword rolling.
Oh, let's see here. Let me stop sharing my screen here and try and share. There we go. There we go.
Boom!
How's
Just
that?
didn't want to miss anything. Awesome.
All right,
We're
good.
cruising.
Thanks for letting me
We're
know.
cruising. No problem. No problem. We're cruising now.
All right, good. Okay, guys, this is Unity, not that slide. This is Unity. So if I were to drag in the fantasy sword that Felipe created, all I've got to do is just drag it in here, press F, and Unity is going to focus in on this sword. So we're in an actual world here, okay? So what I can do here is if I select, let's say, our ground here, I can actually just drag the sword. This is really cool about Unity. You can drag it onto the ground here. And if I press F for focus, I can focus in on our sword here. This is a gun that Felipe made as well. The cool thing about Unity is you're going to use blend files. Okay, they're called .blend files. Traditionally, what you would do is you would export what's called an FBX. So every time you save a file from Blender, you have to export it as an FBX. It's kind of like exporting a PNG every single time you're working with a Photoshop document. Well, now Unity has integration with Blender. So I can literally open up these weapons inside of Blender, tweak them, and then just press Control S, save them, and then they will automatically update in Unity. Okay. And you can just drag them into the scene. It's really cool. Now, the beauty of Unity is that with the right what's called post-processing effects, and they're just camera effects. So if I turn this off, that's without the post-processing effects. This is with them on. With the right post-processing effects, you can actually make a variety of different models from a lot of different sources look like they all fit in one cohesive package, one cohesive game, one product. And that's called asset flipping, okay? So for example, these are models from Felipe, right? I've got my sword here. Let's say I want to scale it up a little bit. So I've got this beautiful sword. I've got a gun. Really great work here, Felipe. This looks awesome. I'm always impressed by how good this stuff looks inside of Unity. So we have these weapons here. And what if I wanted to add a tree? Well, if I search on the asset store, I can actually find some trees that are like $10. And there's actually a lot of free stuff as well. The asset store is in Window Asset Store. But I'm not going to open that up right now because I already have the trees right here. I've installed them. All I got to do is drag them in like this. Look at that. This is made from somebody else, right? So instead of spending a week of my time creating a tree or telling Felipe, hey, buddy, I need you to make some trees for me, I just go find these on the Unity Asset Store, get them for free or pay $20, and I can scatter them throughout my game. Now, they look like they fit pretty good with the style of Felipe's assets here. But what if I wanted to make them match a little bit more? What if, for example, I wanted the leaves to maybe be this orange color and really match that color scheme? And for me, that's really important to my games, as my games always have a very unique color scheme. What you can do is what's called asset flipping. And I want you guys to know this. Asset flipping is a dirty word in the game industry. People don't like to talk about it, but indie game developers are doing this all the time. So you guys shouldn't feel guilty about asset flipping, okay? What asset flipping is opening up, this image here in Photoshop, for example. Now you could tweak this in Substance Painter if it was actually used to create this texture, but oftentimes it's not. So what I can do here is I can literally just go to the hue saturation layer here and add a hue saturation layer. And then I can just maybe tweak the greens to be, well, let's see here, maybe the yellows. Yeah, to be a little bit more orange. See that? And then I can sort of fade. I actually kind of like the branches like that. So I got like a little pink color, but if we wanted to, we could sort of make it not so intense, right? So we're just do whatever we want in Photoshop. It's It's literally like if you unwrapped a present carefully and you had the wrapping paper out and you just colored on it. That's really what asset flipping looks like. Now, obviously, asset flipping can include opening up Blender and tweaking the actual mesh that is the polygons of the model. But I can actually just merge this all down, flatten the image, and just save it out, and then go back to Unity. And look at that. Now I've got a tree that matches our sword here. You know, if we got some rocks here, maybe these are rocks from the asset store. You know, if those don't match, we can open up the color or the texture. I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. I think it's a little too, let's see here. It's not gray enough. I think I want it to match the gray of the sword. And also I think it's a little too detailed. So this is really fun. I love doing this. You can do a smart blur in Photoshop. Really crank that up. So now it looks much more simplistic. See that? Okay. And then I'm going to drop down the saturation and the darkness. And I'm going to merge all this together. Now, obviously, we could save this as a PSD file if we wanted to. That's a Photoshop document file. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to save it as a TGA. If we can. Sometimes it doesn't let us. So change my mind. We're going to save it as a PSD here. And this is actually, I'm kind of glad this happened, honestly, because now I'm going to show you, you can actually just drag in the PSD file as if it was a JPEG image. Unity will import that PSD file right here. And now, look at that. It much more matches our sword here. And if we wanted to tweak the material settings, you can actually see them all over here. We can make it shinier if we want to. We can change the color inside of Unity if we want to. That's the benefit of working with something gray. You can change the color a lot easier. And now that we've got all these assets created and we've flipped them to our liking, we can just drag a ton in, right? With this one here, with this birch tree, I can actually apply these changes to what's called the prefab. And we get into prefabs a lot in the course. So I'm not going to get into it too much. But now they're all the same size here. And I can just drag them in. So I can slowly create a world. And what's cool is you can even scale up these rocks, really large rocks, and make mountains in the background. And in fact, Felipe has done an incredible job with our game Father, utilizing as few assets as possible. The benefit of using as few assets as possible is that it actually ensures the game runs a little bit faster because we don't have a ton of different meshes and a ton of different prefabs and a ton of different textures. So it's cool because with this one rock here, look at this. You just create a bunch of different shapes. We could even put a massive rock over here, start creating mountains. And that would coincide with using the terrain tool, which we cover the terrain tool in the course. We're not going to get into that today. We'll be talking about that in a future webinar. I think that one's in 2 days, is we're going to talk about the terrain tool. But guys, as you can see here, Unity allows us, look at this, look how beautiful, to create these beautiful worlds with a combination of custom assets, but also just standard assets you might download from the Unity asset store. So that's Unity and also Photoshop. Unity, Photoshop, Blender, and Substance Painter are the tools that are totally free to create a world like you see right here. This spider was created in Blender. These trees were assets, right? This light was a custom model from Felipe. So as you can see, we've got all these different hands working on these various models. But ultimately, it all looks cohesive because we understand each tool and how to use them. And believe it or not, guys, I love saying this. It's getting easier and easier to make 3D games, to make 3D worlds, because the software is getting so easy to learn and so easy to use it. It's almost like playing Minecraft. It's almost like playing Roblox. Now, obviously, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic here, but it is getting a lot easier. And so I don't want you guys to be scared jumping into 3D like I was. It's actually a lot of fun to learn. So really quick, guys, I just want to let you know that you can get started and learn 10 plus hours of additional content. It's very similar to the content you see here. Felipe and I if I do say so myself. I know that Felipe does a great job, but I think I do a really good job too, teaching all of this content at our program called 3D Art Pro, and it's currently 40% off because today is the launch day. Felipe and I have been working on this program for the last 7 months. So maybe it's 6 months. I think it's 6 months. I just want to make sure that there's clarity there. 6 months of working on this program. It's been a lot of hard work. We cover Blender, Photoshop, Substance Painter, Unity, all the things we talked about. We go into incredible detail on how you guys can do it too, and you can do it fast. It's like learning stick shift. Once you figure out how to make it work, once you learn the hotkeys and how things function, suddenly you're just creating worlds. It's really fun. We also cover humanoid characters, right? Rigging characters and what's called weight painting. And this is a huge portion of the course, and that is architecture. So that's just a bunch of small elements that you combine together inside of Unity to create a building, for example. We also cover what we talked about earlier, asset flipping. And that is creating indie games, this is important, fast. And you do it fast by asset flipping. Here's a great example. If you were to be a filmmaker, make a short film, there's two choices. Would you buy a couch if you needed a couch for a scene in your movie? Or would you build a couch from scratch? The same is true with indie game development. If you're going to make a game, you probably don't need to make a custom couch unless you have the budget for it and you have a very, very unique style, okay? So keep that in mind. Asset flipping is not a dirty word. It's not wrong, and it's becoming more and more popular. And then finally, most important of all, access to all the models. So if you guys join the program, you're going to get access to all these models, and you can mimic and recreate them and use them to study as you're learning how to 3D model. Guys, these are reviews from my other program, Full-Time Game Dev. You can actually go to fulltimegamedev.com/reviews and see how happy our students are. I have 3,000 plus students worldwide. I don't have any reviews currently for 3D Art Pro because it's brand new, but my program is very similar to Full-Time Game Dev, and these students are really happy. Again, 3,000 students worldwide. Very, very lucky, very, very blessed to have that many students trust me, and I can't wait to hopefully present that same level of care, both Felipe and I, to you guys in learning 3D. So again, 40% off right now, guys, and there's only 200 seats available. We've limited the amount of seats available for the 40% discount. And I know those are selling really, I'll be honest with you guys, they're selling really fast right now. So if you want to join the program, click the link and check it out. 40% off, 200 seats available. And here's the best part. You're going to get my other program, 2D Art Pro, totally free, but only during this 7-day sale event. But that's our program. But guys, if it's not for you, I get it. Like I totally understand it's not for you right now. But I just wanted to say thanks for joining us. I hope you learned a lot in this brief flyover of these 4 free tools.
Awesome. Thomas and Felipe, thank you so much. It's so cool to actually see you working in the software. Also, holy heck, this stuff has come such a long way. I didn't know how easy it was to just pop in and edit assets and have it automatically update. That is so approachable.
I know, it's crazy. It's like playing video games. That's what's so weird. I feel like I don't know about you, Felipe, but I feel like I'm playing video games when I'm creating these 3D worlds.
I totally agree with you. I actually have more fun making this than playing video games. I swear. Like my day is better. Like it's that energy, that excitement, right? Of just making art and making your own story, right? So it's great.
Yeah. Well, and so first off, for everyone who's watching today, I just want to make sure everyone knows the links for the course are in the description. They're also pinned at the top of the comments. And like they said, next Tuesday at midnight, that discount will go away. And there's only 200 seats available, right, Thomas?
Yes, sir. And
Awesome.
and they are, I'll be honest with you guys, they're selling pretty fast right now. So I'm just letting you know that that's what's happening.
Yeah. And for everyone watching as well, hop in the chat. Let us know if you have any questions. We have both of these gentlemen for a while longer, so we can dive into any questions you have. And we had a couple already popping in. Did you? I had one question about the course before we dive into it.
Yeah.
Is there a sort of community available?
Yes.
Are there places where people are sharing things? And
yes. We have a 2D and 3D hub at our channel at server is the right word on Discord. So it's called 2D and 3D Art Pro, and there's already an active community because there's 2D artists there as well, and you guys can showcase all your work, and it's really active. And I honestly, when I launched my 2D program last year, I was thinking, oh man, I don't know if I did a good job teaching this. And then within like 2 weeks, people started posting the stuff that they were learning. And I told one of my students, I said, your work looks better than mine. Like I'm literally feeling jealous right now looking at your artwork on the channel. So they've learned a ton with the 2D community. So the 3D community is going to jump into that community. You guys will have your own separate channels and stuff. But yeah.
Awesome. And I did want to just answer, there were a couple questions just about the course itself. So I wanted to get those out of the way before we dive into some other stuff. But Daddy Lacus was asking if you already bought full-time game dev, do you have access to this? And also just I'm adding on, like, how do the two complement each other? I know the full-time game dev is much more about or also has about building a business around indie games and all of that too, right?
Yep. Yeah. So full-time game dev covers it's what you would call the flagship program. It's a much bigger program. It's a little pricier, but the full-time game dev program, I can't think of a better time to buy the 3D Art Pro and 2D Art Pro because it's basically half off. And then you get 2D Art Pro completely free. I was thinking yesterday, do I really want to do 2D Art Pro completely free? I think I do, and I think obviously I do because it is free, and I want people to be able to get access to those programs, especially my students. So yeah, I mean it's the best time to buy right now if you are currently a full-time game dev student. But yeah, 3D Art Pro and 2D Art Pro take what you learn in full-time game dev to the next level. Okay, so full-time game dev is like, how do you code all this stuff? Well, coding is one thing, and running a studio and reaching out to publishers and marketing, that's all covered at full-time game dev. But if you want to hyper focus, for example, like Felipe here, Felipe is an indie game developer, but he's not running the studio. He's not doing the marketing like I am. He's hyper focused on 3D art as an indie game developer. That's what these courses cover. That hyper focused, and also if you're on a team, an indie game development team, this is great for you because it's like, well, you want to take your 2D art or your 3D art to the next level, but you don't want to have to worry about all the other stuff related to building an indie game studio, which, to be honest, it's a lot. And so if you're more interested in doing kind of like what Felipe's doing for my studio, then it's definitely for you. Yeah.
Right. So a little more for the artist versus the business.
Yeah, totally. There's not a lot of there's no business stuff in this. This is purely art and how to become a masterful artist for indie games.
That's awesome. And I love this question. It's put you a little on the spot, but I think it's so valuable just for quality control or whatever it is. But why is it limited to 200 people?
Yeah. So basically, anytime we run a sale event, we want to make sure that we're not opening the floodgates for the Discord server. Tons of people showing up. So 200, usually when you do a big sale event, you'll get it's usually about 200 people will show up. And I think that's enough for the Discord server right now. Everybody can get to know each other. Everybody can learn. And then we'll wait a couple months, maybe 3 months before we do another sale event.
Well, and I appreciate that so much. So it is quality control, making sure the community can actually involve with each other and not just it's a total hellhole, right?
And everybody knows this. It's a classic sales event. So you limit the amount of students. I think that's totally fine to do, but really, yes, you want to control the amount of students coming into the private server. Weirdly enough, I've heard, I didn't think this at the time when I was creating my programs, but the server is really important. People love being able to spend time with each other. So I don't want a huge flood into this server where it's a bunch of strangers. So I think 200 people is a good size. And I think there's more than 200 people currently on the server. I think it's more than that. I think they'll be able to welcome you guys a lot more warmly than if it was 1,000 people.
Right. I love that. And then a last question about the course before we dive into some more technical questions. This was more of a statement, but I'm turning it into a question. Wig was asking, I need 3D models for web design and UXD. So you highlight these tools as being for gaming and game development, but all of this should be applicable for anywhere you need 3D art or 2D art, right? Like it's just the skills to be able to do that for anything.
What do you think, Felipe?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In fact, just diving into like different uses of like these softwares, right? I mean, we see a lot of like we see a huge influx of like architecture and the interior design companies using engines like Unity or Unreal and things like that to showcase their work. Websites now have built-in scenes that you can just interact and then just like make it way more interesting than just going to a website. So you can
Right.
actually go to places. So all these things are available there. And if you just know 3D, if you know Photoshop, those are all the things that everybody needs to do if they're going to come up with that stuff nowadays. And I
Mhm.
think if you leverage what these softwares can do for you, there's a huge advantage there if you apply them correctly, if you want to explore different venues. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
just remember, to who's ever asking that, what was his name again? I can't remember. A
Wig
quarter of
Mezzo.
Okay, great. A quarter of the course, maybe a third of the course is focused on Unity.
Mm,
So you just keep that in mind. If you're not going to use Unity and you don't ever plan on it, just keep that in mind that that's part of the program, and that might not be useful to you. But
right.
I think it will be. I think you'll love Unity, but just keep it in mind.
I think so too.
Yep.
But if it's 40% off and that's a third of the course, then you're paying
And a
for
2D art program. Hey,
yeah,
the
and the
2D art
2D art.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and let's dive in. We've got some more just technical questions here that I want to get into with you two. So, a one-man show is asking for indie game devs just starting up and who want to save costs. What are your thoughts on free programs like GIMP instead of Photoshop, or would you recommend something else? Now, I know Photoshop used to have a free option. Do they still have that? I know you can
Like a
get in.
trial, yeah.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
I know it's like $10 a month is the minimum you can get away with, right?
Uh, I'm not sure. I'm doing $25 a month right now,
Right.
but I'm getting all the programs. So I all I can say is I've got 270,000 subscribers on YouTube, and all I ever hear is great things about GIMP. That's all
Mm.
I can speak to. I just hear great things from my community. I mean, Felipe, do you have any knowledge on that?
I think it's very similar to what we were talking about Blender. You know, like it came a long way. I think like just the necessity as well. Now I think the fact that Photoshop, Adobe might have changed things around could be something to do with it because these softwares are picking up. They're doing great. And I don't think there's anything wrong with learning that. Photoshop, of course, is a standard of the industry. I think it's valuable if you give it a chance, especially how affordable they are nowadays. But yeah, I think GIMP came a long way. I've heard great things about it too. I don't
Yep.
personally use it, but I know it has developed quite a bit in the past years.
Well, the truth is, from what I can gather, I'm 99% sure about this. If you didn't want to learn Photoshop and you instead wanted to use GIMP with Substance Painter and Unity and Blender, like you can do that because ultimately it's just image files. I'm not sure about the integration of a GIMP file type in Unity, but most people don't even like. This is so funny. Most people don't even realize that you can import blend files and PSD files into Unity. Most
Right.
people will export it as an FBX or a JPEG. So if that's what you do already is export your images, then GIMP should be totally fine for any of those tools. So
Right. Well, and there is a little advantage to Photoshop, just that if you learn it, it's so ubiquitous in the industry, right?
it
Like
is.
it's
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
it really is.
And I did just just to give clarity there, I did just quickly go to the Adobe website for their photography bundle, which has Photoshop. You can get into it for $10 a month.
Yep.
So if
Awesome.
that's the only thing you're paying for, that's like 2 cups of coffee a month, right?
I mean, this is the thing. I can sound like a salesman sometimes, so I apologize here. But like investing in tools and courses, like I've bought thousands of dollars worth of courses, but investing in tools and stuff, it's not just getting the tool. Like it's gonna pay, guys. If you learn Photoshop and you really want to get into the industry, whether it's graphic design or web design or game development, learn the tools and make the investment instead of going out to eat twice a month. Get Photoshop because it's gonna pay off 100-fold, 1,000-fold if you just are willing to pay the subscription fee. So and I know that some of you just can't. I get that. I totally understand that. But when you do have a moment where you think you might be able to afford it, I think it's worth it. It's totally worth it because these are skills that might just change your life. And I know they did for me, and they have for Felipe as well. So
Certainly
just keep
have,
that
yeah.
in mind.
And you can hopefully start selling even those skills, right? And maybe
Yeah.
pay for that $10 a month and get yeah.
Yep.
And then there was another question about like Substance Painter and all of that, but I just want to reiterate any software where you can export those files works in Unity.
Yep.
Right. Cool.
Yep.
I love this question. We had one question from Derek here. Any tips on creating in Blender efficiency? So listening to music. So more like a workflow question. Like, do you have any tips for being more efficient when you're working? How do you stay focused? How do you stay on task and keep the ball rolling?
Oh, I guess I could answer that. Yeah, certainly. Like music, podcasts, all that stuff really does a lot for me. It really depends on person to person, right? I mean, like I know some people might get distracted really easily, while others kind of need that thing in the background so that they don't get distracted really. Um, but at the end of the day, it's how when you have like a good design in your mind and you have that vision. Sometimes I told Thomas about this a couple times when working on Father. Sometimes I dream about what I'm going to do in the next day. it's
That's
it's it,
awesome.
it is. And here's the crazy thing, and hopefully, or maybe not hopefully, you guys will get to that someday. I literally opened Blender in my head and
Ah,
did the model. It clicked everywhere. I dreamed about making the model.
ah.
So the next day when I opened up Blender, everything was there. It was just like going and applying that.
Yeah.
So uh you just keep using it. Keep using it. Have a good design in your mind, like the idea of like, oh, I want to make a sword, I want to make a character, I want to just like think about these things through, and then it should come naturally to you. But just keep doing it, keep at it, because that's the only way, really. You
Yeah.
just put your time into anything, you're gonna like see the results after a little while. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know for me, when I'm using Blender, I can't even tell you the hotkeys, but my hands can. It's
Hmm.
really weird. Like
Mm.
my hands are doing stuff, but when I try, I don't even know what key I just pressed, but I pressed it. And so it's a lot, like I said earlier, it's a lot like stick shift. It's muscle memory. I mean, Felipe, is that true for you? Does it just work?
Oh yeah, you don't think about it anymore, right? It's like playing an instrument. If you play like something, like it just comes to you, right?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
hotkeys are really learning your hotkeys are going to improve your
Yep.
efficiency, right? Yeah.
Certainly, yeah.
It's
Felipe,
it's
that's like
it's
some
everything. I think it's
yeah.
everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not as good as Felipe, but like I think hotkeys, yes, you have to
Yeah.
know your hotkeys.
Mhm.
Well, and Felipe, that's like some Nikola Tesla stuff that you're dreaming about. but
Well,
but I do really love like I'm taken away from that too. Like don't don't just use the time that you're in the software to think about these things. If you're on a walk or other stuff like that, or asleep, if you can do that,
yeah, no,
like visualize and get a little obsessed, and that'll
Yeah.
increase your efficiency, right?
That's
it's
honestly
yeah.
the thorn in my side with my life is
Mm.
game development because last night I was thinking about it. It was like 3 a.m. I couldn't fall asleep because I was just thinking about my game,
Right.
and it just won't go away. It just never stops running. So that's the one thing to keep in mind is for those of you who want to get into game development, just know when you're playing God, when you're making music and art and 3D and all this stuff, you're gonna be consumed, and it's
Yeah.
tough.
Ah,
Sometimes it's hard to shut it off.
I
Yeah.
gotta call this out from Tank Dern was saying sometimes I brush my teeth from one side only thinking I'm using the mirror in Blender. I love that so
That's a
much.
good one.
Uh,
Yeah, that's really true.
yeah, well, so we've got all the questions we had for today. I want to thank you both so much for your time today, and remind everyone watching that we're doing this the same time, same place for the next 2 days. Thomas, did you want to give just a brief dive into what we're going to handle tomorrow?
Yeah, so tomorrow I believe, Felipe, actually you're doing that one, right? You're doing the majority of that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We're gonna
what are we
be
doing?
so we have a really cool 3D model to show you guys. I don't know if should we tell them what it is or not,
You can tell
because
them. That's fine.
so we have Thor's hammer, Mjolnir,
Ah,
directly from Marvel movies. We're gonna take a look at like how we made that model on Blender as well, and how we textured it in Substance. So everything that you kind of saw today, just like seeing Blender for the first time, if you have, or Substance for the first time, you're gonna see that in action tomorrow. with the Thor's hammer, which I think is an amazing piece. So can't get that wrong. And it's not really the focus of making it super realistic, but something that is indie friendly, something that you yourself can come up with. Once you learn like the ropes of like making 3D, so it's really cool. Don't miss it up.
And then the webinar after that, I'll sort of be taking the wheel there, and I'm going to show. So today I showed like generally what it looks like to throw some trees and rocks into Unity, but I want to show you guys really quick how you can make terrain, mountains, start painting trees, creating forests. It's so weird because when I found out about the Unity terrain tool, I was like, so I could basically create like a game that looks like Breath of the Wild. And so you can just start painting, and all of a sudden you've got a character, like you throw in a first person character, and you're exploring this massive world. And all you did was just drag your paintbrush and create some terrain. So I'll be doing that in the next webinar.
I love it. So fun. Well, everyone watching, once again, same time tomorrow and the day after, we'll be here with Thomas and Felipe, and we'll be diving in. And if you had a good time today, please like and subscribe to the Spotlight channel. If you'll be here tomorrow and the day after, we love bringing folks like Thomas and Felipe out here to share their knowledge and help us grow our skills in everything from business, language learning, game development, all of these things. And before we wrap up today, there was one more question that I think is awesome to leave off on, because you two are both clearly not only good at what you do, but you're efficient. And this is a little bit in the same realm of how do you stay like efficient within this, but any tips on how to keep focus, like when you get stuck at something and don't know how to continue. So how do you get past the writer's block? You have all these tools. Say you're even in the course and you have all of this, but you sit down and you're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Great question.
There's a ton of reasons why you're going to get stuck on something. So for me, it's oftentimes the reason why I lose energy and motivation is because I don't like what I'm working on. It's boring. Me and Felipe were talking about this the other day. I'm kind of bored of Father, the game that we're currently working on. And so I told Felipe, I'm like, we're taking a break, dude. Like, let's do something else for a little bit. And I think that's really, really important, is if you get stuck on a model and you just are having a real hard time finding inspiration, jump to something else. I mean, I know you did that, Felipe, when you were trying to do one of the humanoid characters.
Yes.
You were like, let's just jump onto something else for a little bit and take a break. So what about you?
Yeah, backing away from what you're doing helps, and sometimes you can afford doing that. But for the times you can't, for the times that you just have to brace yourself and push through, this is something that it's very hard to let go when you are an artist and you're an inspiring artist. You have to kind of prove yourself a little bit as well in the results, and like what you're making is you might not have the best version of what is in your mind right now, but just finish it. Just do it, have it done, call it done, and then put in your game and then come back to it later. Because, as you continue to do other things, you're going to go back to that and like, oh, wow, I have so much more now. I've built this library of ideas, and like, it's just flowing so much easier now because you started working on other things. So you gave yourself a chance to just let go of that and call it done. But it's never really done. Right. I think a lot of movie makers say that. George Lucas say Star Wars is never done, or things like that. So yeah, it really is, just go to the next thing and then come back to it later. And if you can do that.
It's one of those things you got to just, Felipe, you're totally right. Like, you got to distance yourself from it and almost let it go. And the thing that I've been really trying, I mean, Felipe, you and I both have to do this when we're working together. We have to just tell each other, don't be a perfectionist. Just keep going, keep moving forward. And you want to know what really helps. And Felipe, I think this is true for us. Having a deadline for your project. For, let's say you've got, a beautiful 3D world for a first person game that you need to create for your team. Having a deadline is suddenly you go, you know what? I really don't care if that tree looks like crap, because tomorrow this is due at, for example, GDC. And we both, Felipe and I, have just been through this where, like, there's so much wrong with the demo that we created for our game. and it's currently at GDC. I just posted a video about it actually today on my channel about how I feel like the game is on fire. I feel like it's crap, but it's one of those things where I go, most people don't see it the way that I see it.
Right.
Most people, guys, aren't going to see your 3D art the way you see it because you're looking at it from a personal, it's like your baby. It really shouldn't be your baby because it's just a 3D model, but that's how you see it when you're working on it. You got to learn to let that go. So for me, after being an indie game developer, I've been an indie game developer for like 15 years. After 15 years of doing this, I really just don't care. Like it's not my baby. I've got my own babies. I've got my own kids, actual children. And so the games, they're just fun, right? So I don't worry so much about your projects. They're not you. They're just meshes on your computer screen. You're going to be okay. So like Felipe's saying, learn to let go and finish it.
Love that so much. I think that's a great note to wrap up for today. Thank you both so much. For everyone watching, thank you for being here, asking all your questions, diving in with us. Hop into the comments. Thank Thomas and Felipe for their time. And come join us tomorrow and Thursday. We'll be here diving into more aspects of this, and use the links in the description and the comments to go check out the course and everything it offers. Once again, it's not just the 3D course, but the 2D as well. So that's a lot of value to hop on and check out. That'll only be there until next Tuesday at midnight. Gentlemen, thank you so much for today. I'm super excited to dive in for the next 2 days. We'll see you soon.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
Jonah.
Thank you so much.
See you soon. Thank you, everybody.